Pythagorean theorem has to be done on a right angle triangle. Okay, so it's key that you can only do this if there's a 90 degree somewhere in the triangle. If there's no 90, you can't do Pythagorean theorem. The next part to doing Pythagorean theorem is labeling things properly. There's always something called a hypotenuse on a right angle triangle. The hypotenuse is across from the 90 degree angle. So if you're looking at this triangle, this is my 90. Across from the 90 is my hypotenuse. This thing. Oh, yo, Matthew, that was your sheet. I gave it to you. You have to get the hypotenuse right. It's critical. At this point, the other two sides, we just refer to them as legs. They will have a special name later, but for now, I just call them, I have two legs and I have a hypotenuse. When you're doing Pythagorean theorem, the hypotenuse is called C. The legs are called A and B. It doesn't matter which leg you call A and which one you call B. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean they're equal, but they're treated the same. Right? So I'm just going to call this one A. I'm going to call this one B. But it really doesn't matter. So if you flip your legs, you'll be fine.
But the hypotenuse always has to be C.
But the hypotenuse has to be C. That's important. All right. There's two Pythagorean theorems. There's actually the same one, just rearranged. Okay, so I'm going to give you two formulas here. The first formula is the one that you're probably familiar with, which is A squared plus B squared. Yeah, that's the one you're probably familiar with. That means that one leg squared plus the other leg squared will equal the hypotenuse value squared. The second formula is the first one but rearranged. So it's C squared minus A squared equals B squared. There's two formulas for two different situations, right? The first situation, we use this one to find the hypotenuse. The second situation, we use to find a leg. So depending on the question, depends on the formula that you want to use. If I'm looking for the hypotenuse, I'm using this formula. If I'm looking for one of the legs, which attaches to the 90 degree, then I'm using this formula.
Is it always C?
And it has to follow C squared minus A squared. That's also important. So it's also going to be the hypotenuse squared minus what the other leg squared.
Even if it's smaller than A?
That's a good point. So the hypotenuse, because it's always across from the 90, actually is always the biggest line. So no matter what, it'll be the biggest one, which is good to know too. All right, let's try a couple questions. So if I look at this first triangle, the first thing I want to do is label it. The hypotenuse
times 12 squared equals
plus squared. Yeah. Across from the 90 is the hypotenuse. This is your hypotenuse. I don't think so. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's 5 times 12. 5 plus 5 times 5 times 5.
It's 5 squared plus 12 squared.
5 plus 5. Then
You're working ahead. I know you guys are ahead, but we're not all there
But
yet.
is that right? 5 plus 5.
5 times 5.
25
plus
12.
Yeah. So this is your hypotenuse. These are my legs. So I'm going to call them A and B. Because I'm looking for the hypotenuse, I'm using a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Because I'm looking for the hypotenuse. If you can label properly and pick the right formula, the math won't be too crazy. So plug your numbers in. So this becomes 5 squared.
169.
Do you have
Nice.
a calculator?
Yep.
Into square root.
Yeah. So 5 squared is 25. Right? 5 times 5 is 25. Plus 12 squared, 12 times 12 is 144. Equals c squared.
It's 13.
Beautiful. 25 plus 144 is 169. And typically on tests, that's an answer I get a lot of, is 169. Go ahead, Reese.
Wait, okay, so I just did 5 squared plus 12 squared
Yeah,
equals 169.
that's what you got?
Yeah.
Yep, that's good. So you're right here.
Where did the 25 and then the 144 come from?
5 squared equals 25.
Oh.
And 12 squared equals 144. So I was just calculating slower.
Okay,
You went faster than me.
I thought I don't know, like
No, you're good.
made Galileo go for the money or something.
Arla said the answer, I think it was Arla, said the answer is 13. Right? So how'd you get 13? Perfect. She square rooted. Because you don't want c squared, you just want c. So to get rid of the squared, you square root both sides. When you square root both sides, the square root of 169 is 13. On your calculator, depending on where your button is, depends on how you kind of hit it, right? So if you're using your phone, if you turn it sideways, you'll see the little square root button. You'll put 169 and hit that square root button. If you're having trouble with that part, tell me and I'll come give it to you. Yeah.
Where's the information for this question?
For B? Oh, I don't know. I'll have to look. Give me a second because we're going to practice. I'll give you practice time in a second. Okay, if you're looking at B, this is C, this is yeah, it is. Thank you, David. This is A, this is B. So the first step is label your triangle, then pick a formula. So if I'm looking for a leg, then I'm using the formula c squared minus a squared equals b squared. But I had to label properly first, right? And that's the big first step. C has to be the hypotenuse across from the 90. If you're not getting that right, you won't get any of the questions right. So you have to have C labeled properly. Then you pick your formula. Then you can start to put things into the formula. So this is 86.8 squared minus 74.1 squared.
So you times 86.8 twice.
Yep.
Subtract 74.1 and times that by 4.
Yes.
But then I did that and I got 2,000 and something.
So you should get, it's going to be big. So like 86.8 squared
But that doesn't
was
add up.
7534.24. And then 74.1 squared.
That doesn't add up.
Remember what's your last step going to be, June? You said
Minus them in the middle.
right, but then you have to square root those values.
Somehow.
Right, so 86.8 gave me this, 74.1 squared gave me this. When I subtract those two values, it gives me 2,043 0.43, which is what Jaden was saying. Like, it doesn't make sense. You're right. That would make no sense for an answer in a triangle. And typically that's how you save yourself, is like looking at the answer and be like, wait a minute, that does not make sense. And the last step that people always forget is you've got to square root. Or you got to get rid of that square somehow. So when you square root the number,
Divide by its own.
there should be an actual square root button somewhere on the calculator. For your calculator, you have to hit the second button right here, and then you'll see a little blue square root symbol on the left side where I'm pointing. Yeah, it looks like this. Yeah. Yeah, Josh. Yeah.
I don't think I have
On your phone, you have to tilt your phone sideways, and it should be there somewhere. And you get 45.2. Yeah, Jane, go ahead.
Do you have to do that before?
You have to, okay, actually, this is a very good question. So, gentlemen over there, you have to go in these steps. So, you must multiply
What did
first.
you get on A then?
13. So, you have to multiply first, then you subtract, then you square root. It has to go in that order. Yeah. Well, it's actually not going to be bad because it's pretty repetitive. So if you can set it up, the calculations won't be too crazy.
So you square root, then put the number.
You square to get this,
Yeah.
subtract, and then square root that number. So in your calculator, you do the square root symbol first, and then put the number in. Yeah. And it should give you 45.2. The next two questions are for you to try on your own. So I'll give you a couple minutes. You had two questions, 45.2. Try those two questions on your own, and then I'll show you the right answer so you can see if you're doing it right. Okay, so the answer both on the board, it looks like most of you guys got it. So the red one should have been 111.5. B should have been 32.
What if we like bring it back to elementary school and do a circle around the circle?
That might be fun. Example 3. Okay, I'm going to leave you to do number 3 by yourself. I'm just going to help you start it. So if you look at that triangle, you'll notice there's no numbers on it. So you have to write the numbers. So when you're looking at a triangle on a grid, you can count the horizontal lines is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks. And the vertical line is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks. To find the hypotenuse, you can't count the blocks because it's on an angle. So you'll have to do Pythagorean Theorem to find this value, which is C.
It's the same thing.
Same thing. So it's Pythagorean Theorem just applied now to a drawing.
Yeah, you just gotta figure out.
Yep. So I'll leave you be. Try Pythagorean Theorem on that one. I'll put my work on the board so you can follow along. You should have got 7.8 for that triangle that was on that grid.
I'm just thinking that question.
You come down to this one.
Can you go back to the time?
Yeah, sorry. If you look at example 4, you can't just count the blocks because it said the side length of each square is 10 kilometers. Each square is 10 kilometers. That means when I'm going to count this, from Jonestown to Karsten is actually 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 kilometers. From Karsten to Skeen is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120. So you need to be doing Pythagorean Theorem with those values because each square was 10 kilometers, right? Kind of like a scale diagram.
Do you count the dot first?
No, so I start there, and then I'm like skipping to each stop. So it'll be 10, 20, 30,
Because I got
40,
6
50,
or 6D.
60. Maybe just double check. Maybe you just started here and said that was 10, but that would be 0.
I think I messed up on that one.
Is the 5 boxes times it by 10?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we're doing practice
I
sheets?
should start.
We will, yeah. Did you do those values? 50 and 120?
Yeah, I already got that.
Okay, so I'll let you practice that. I'll bring it to you right now. So you can try that Pythagorean Theorem. It should be 50 and 120 because each block is 10 kilometers. All right, so I'll look at it. Just let me scroll up there. So number 4, the answer on the board should be 130. You guys look like you were kind of crushing that.
Yeah.
Number 5, you do have to times those values by 3 because it only told you the speed of the car. So those of you who've worked ahead, like Luke and Aiden, check your values here. It's not 80 and 55.
G times.
Because they were driving at that speed for 3 hours, you have to times it by 3.
So not 80 times 8.
So 80 times 3 is actually 240 kilometers. And then this side is 55 times 3. So you actually are doing Pythagorean theorem with 240 and 165. And then to figure out how far apart they are, you're doing Pythagorean theorem. But you had to multiply by 3 to figure out how far they had traveled before you could figure out the distance between them. So those of you who worked ahead, look back. Some of these questions aren't as simple as you're making them out to be, right? Make sure you read the question. Don't just do the triangle. And now it is as easy as you think it's going to be. So just do Pythagorean theorem on that thing. That trick, right, is that you got to multiply by 3 to make sure you get those speeds, the actual distance. When you do the math, which I left up on the board for you, you should have got 291.2 kilometers away from each other. I'll leave that math up on the board because a couple of you guys are just out, so you're catching up. Number 6 and number 7, you have to draw the triangle. So when you're drawing that triangle, make it a 90 degree. I know it's 90 degree because it told me I had a right angle triangle. It told me one leg was 6, another leg was 10, and then it said find the hypotenuse, which is the side across from the 90. If you look at number 7, it's the same type of question. I'll set it up for you, and then you can try both on your own. Number 7, it says 90 degree angle. The hypotenuse is 25, so 25 is over here. A leg is 15. Find the other leg. So try Pythagorean theorem on both those guys. 6 and 7 are on the board.
You're still working on that? You're so slow.
Yeah, well, I'm just going at a pace that's nice and manageable. So when you're doing these ones, draw the triangle. Make sure that you have them labeled properly, right? So in number 6, we're looking for the hypotenuse, so I use this formula. In number 7, I'm looking for a leg, so I use this formula. Always square root as your last step. You should have got 11.7 and 20 as your answers. I'm going to actually skip that latter question. We're going to look at this one, because I think those of you who are ahead of me, you actually got stuck on this question too. So those of you who are ahead of me, if you want to look at these 2 questions, I'm going to do them with you. Make sure you do them right. Okay, so everyone's flipped back. Example number 9. Perfect. Example number 9 says determine the perimeter of the triangle. The perimeter is the outside. So as if you had to walk around the outside of this shape. The perimeter is this that I'm going to do in green. So it's that outside.
You literally just said that.
It's the outside all added up, Arlen.
Mr. Kennedy, can I go to the washroom?
Yeah.
Chill out.
All right, looking at this question. If I want to do the perimeter, I can almost do it right now. The perimeter would be 13 plus 5 plus 9.
Can I go to the washroom?
No, just wait.
Please don't let him.
It's 13 plus 5 plus 9 plus whatever this side is.
So wait, is it A plus B plus C equals D?
So now we got a problem, right? Because this triangle poses 2 problems. First thing is, it's not a right angle, right?
It's a square now.
Yeah, that's not a right angle triangle, the big one. So I can't do this squared equals that squared, because it's not a 90. So instead, what we have to do, try Reese.
Okay, so we have to do the little triangle at the top, we have to do A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And then once we have C squared, we can do 9, which is the a squared for the second one, plus b squared equals c squared, and then we add up the perimeter.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you look, I actually have to use this little triangle first to figure out what this side length is right there, which I've called B. Then I need to do this triangle on the bottom part, because I'll have that. I know this side's 9. I'll do Pythagorean theorem again to get this side. Then I can add the perimeter up. But I have to do Pythagorean theorem twice to make this happen. So if I'm looking at my top triangle would be 13 squared minus 5 squared equals b squared. This is from the top triangle.
Can I go to the washroom now?
No, wait for this to come back. 13 is 169. 5 squared is 25 equals b squared. You subtract those, you get 144 equals b squared. And we always square root as our last step to get 12 equals b. That means I now know this side is 12. If I know this side is 12, I can then do Pythagorean theorem on the bottom half of this triangle. So I can do a squared plus b squared equals c squared on the bottom part of this triangle.
So we're rearranging everything.
Yeah, like you had to do it twice, right? You had to use the top triangle to get enough information to do the bottom triangle. You always have to have two sides to do Pythagorean theorem, right? So like looking at this, the top triangle had two sides. I used those two sides to find the third. That gave me two sides for the bottom triangle. It gave me 9 and 12 to help me find C. When we do Pythagorean theorem on that guy, we're now going to do 12 squared plus 9 squared equals C squared. That's the bottom triangle. That's 144 plus 81 equals C squared. If you add those together, that's 225 equals C squared. The square root of 225, I think, is 15. It is. So you square root as your last step, and you get 15 equals C.
What if there's no slant?
If there's no slant, you're going to have to make a slant.
How do I make a slant?
Is that on the practice sheet?
No.
Oh, the next question. I'll show you. Because that's going to mess people up. It's going to mess everybody up. So that means this missing side was 15. One of the trickier parts of this unit is answering the question. We just did a lot of Pythagorean theorem, but we haven't answered the question yet. The question said, what's the perimeter? So I have to use that number all the way back over here to calculate the outside of that big shape. So it was 13 plus 5 plus 9 plus 15, because that's the third side. I wouldn't add the 5. Oh, I did add the 5. 13 plus 5 plus 9 more, because that's from here to here. And then plus 15 gets me back to B. This means your final answer is actually 42, which is the answer to everything in life. No? Just me? It's a reference to a movie. I'm trying to be hip and cool.
Okay, how about now? Luke's probably not even in the washroom anymore.
Maybe if you ask politely, maybe you can some thank you.
Well, you had a question about this next one. I really want you to see it.
Well then, please don't know.
After I start this up, Jaden, I'll let you go.
August.
Okay,
Started?
example 10. So I think almost everybody had a question on number 10. Right? Like, everyone who even worked ahead was like, oh, I don't get number 10. Number 10 has two triangles in it. One is on the ground and one is in the air. So if you look at this, they've asked you for the length of the diagonal in this rectangular prism. They're asking for that dotted line. It goes from the bottom of the prism to the top of the prism. There is a triangle there. It's just in the air. So it goes along that dotted line, I'm going to zoom in on it so you can see better.
You know how to do it?
Barely. There's that line in the air, and then I can go straight down, and then I can connect along the ground. That triangle's in the air.
That's so fair.
When I look at that triangle in the air, I don't know what the dotted line is. That's what I'm looking for. I know this side over here is the height. It's 5. And I don't know what this is on the ground. So I have a triangle in the air where I only know one thing. That means I can't do Pythagorean Theorem yet. So instead, I have to try to find another triangle to get one of those missing sides. The other triangle I'm going to do is along the ground here. So if I go 12 to 7 and then along the ground here, I've created another triangle, which I then could use to find that length.
No.
Then I can do my triangle in the air.
With that logic, I could just go like bang, triangle. See that?
Why can't I do that? It is a triangle.
But see it, also triangle.
The person who made the
True.
formula is
His name is Pythagorean. The person who made the formula. His name is Pythagorean.
The name is Pythagorean. Look at all this credit. So now what?
Now we're going to have to try to find that missing side. So we'll start with the triangle on the ground. On the ground, I'm missing the hypotenuse. So that means I need to do a squared plus b squared equals c squared.
Where is the ground?
So it's like on the floor of this prism.
It's the bottom triangle?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm doing 12 squared plus 7 squared equals c squared. That's 144 plus 49 equals c squared,
And then you just do it like
which is 193.
I get it.
Jaden, don't be disruptive out there.
It all depends where it is.
He's special.
He's special.
We got a little.
He's our special guy. We love him.
Frenchies.
Your last step is to square root. When I square root 193, I get 13.9, yeah. Because this isn't my final answer, I'm going to use a few of those decimals, so I'm going to go 892.
Oh, let's just get it.
Okay, just do 13.9. All right. You know what? I did that for you. Don't say I never did nothing for you.
I never did. Okay, that's why
That told me the distance here.
I'm not.
Then I can do this triangle in the air because I know this is 13.9. I know it goes up 5. And then I can figure out that diagonal on its way down. So I'm doing Pythagorean Theorem again, but in the air. I'm going to do this.
I was going to the bathroom and Jaden just came in and kicked me.
Are you okay?
No, suspend him.
Okay. I don't know if I have that power. So in the air, I'm also looking for the hypotenuse because the 90 degree was in this corner. That means this was C. So I'm doing a squared plus b squared equals c squared again.
What?
What part of that?
Rearranging the letters.
Yeah, it's hard because this was called C on the ground, but it's actually A when you're doing the one in the air, right? That is confusing. So we had to relabel this triangle because we're now doing a new triangle, which does definitely make it confusing. That means I have 13.9 squared plus 5 squared equals my new c squared. 13.9 squared is 193.21 plus 25 equals c squared.
18.21.
Yep, 218.21. Thank you, Miles.
All good, Miles. Because
Miles killing it. And then what's your last step always in Pythagorean theorem? You gotta always square root. Always. To give you an answer of 14.8. And that's my final answer because that is the distance they wanted to know. They wanted to know that diagonal. That diagonal is 14.8.
I need to start reading the question because that's going to get me to 0.
Yeah, reading the question will be critical in this unit.